Hello, everyone, and welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Come to you, as always, from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful eyes of the Galactic Empire. My name is John Mark Tully. Joining me today, as always, are my two co-hosts.
Lord Helmet.
And Brian Karasik representing the aforementioned eyes of the Watchful Empire.
How you gents doing this afternoon?
Doing well, doing well. Good to see you guys again.
I am doing... I'm not doing too bad. Not doing too bad, I can't lie. Now, we are unfortunately not talking about Lord Helmet today.
No.
We are not talking.
Although I would be open to a spin-off.
Former roommate.
Yes, a spin-off would be good.
So
yes,
I
the story
actually
where you
did
find out the Lord Helmet is really
I did the math on that a while ago.
Is really Darth Vader's. Sorry.
I love how you guys keep talking over each other.
Go ahead, John Mark. I got to pull something up here.
I was going to say I think it would be funny to have a story where Lord Helmet turns out to be somehow Anakin's actual roommate. The whole thing of I'm your brother's cousin's uncle's former roommate, and you find out the former roommate was actually Anakin Skywalker.
That would be great. It would make a lot of sense too.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, here it is. One sec while we're on the topic. I am your father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate. Your father's brother's nephew's cousin is you. Your father's brother is your uncle. Your uncle's son is your cousin. Sorry, your brother's nephew is your cousin. So depending on the number of people in each generation, your father's brother's nephew's cousin can be you.
And I'm my own grandpa.
It maths out. All right, Fry. Okay, sorry to distract.
No, that was I think that was kind of necessary.
Yeah, it was. Anyway, we are way off topic here. 2 minutes in, and we are already off the rails.
For three white guys to talk about Star Wars. Let's get to it.
Yes.
What are we talking about today, John?
We are talking about the man in black himself, the Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Vader. Yes. Last month, of course, during our character profile breakdown, we discussed Anakin, and today we're moving on to his Sith alter ego, Darth Vader.
Yes, we are.
I thought it would be... So what I would like to do for this discussion is kind of talk about the cultural phenomenon that is Darth Vader, what makes the character so popular, and kind of his backstory. Not really, because we all know his backstory, but ultimately what made him such a compelling villain and such a sympathetic villain. And one question, we've discussed this before, and we had a whole show about it actually, but I think it'll be interesting to kind of bring it back up again, is who was responsible for the fall of Anakin? Who was responsible for Vader becoming Vader? Because I think that can be an interesting discussion. But first, let's talk about, the cultural phenomenon. You ask most people just off the street, name a Star Wars character, whether they've seen Star Wars or not. Probably 9 times out of 10, they're going to say Darth Vader. Even if they've never watched. Darth Vader is one of those characters that I feel transcends pop culture. And he's one of those people, and he's one of only a handful of people that I can think of that do that. That whether or not you've seen, Darth Vader is one of them in science fiction. People know who Darth Vader is. Yeah. I think to some extent in Star Trek, Captain Kirk is. You ask someone to name a Star Trek character, they're going to say Kirk. You ask people that or Spock. I think Spock would be a better one. In wrestling, I think Hulk Hogan. People know who Hulk Hogan is, whether they watch wrestling or not. They kind of know. Oh yeah. So I think those are like he's kind of in that same sphere of characters that people know, even if they are never watched that thing at all.
Sure.
That makes sense.
He's an iconic image, and he harkens back to Bushido Samurai times. I think for me, when I first saw him when I was 4, I was just immediately sold because he's obviously separate from and yet over everybody else in the Empire. So like from the moment we meet him, every conversation he has in episode 4, in the opening parts of episode 4, he's unique in a galaxy spanning hierarchy. And so I think that's appealing. It sets him out. He's an iconoclast, but he's also part of a larger organization. As a youth, I was uncertain he was a robot, a cyborg, or not, or like what his deal was. I thought he was a robot when I was little at first. But also from the moment that we see, I think maybe I'm reading into it because I know it. I can't look at it with fresh eyes, but when Palpatine says the son of Anakin Skywalker was not be allowed to become a Jedi, I feel that Prowse's body and Jones's voice both put some doubt in there that Palpatine is perhaps not privy to, whereby we see just a flicker of the desire to be who he once was. And then when he asks Luke to join me and we can rule the galaxy as father and son, to me, that's Vader. Vader. He's in a rut, and he's furnishing that rut. He's furnished it, but he wants to see a way out. He can't really see a way to not be Darth Vader, and so the closest he can come is he wants Luke to be by his side. And I think to me, he's a compelling villain because he is an unstoppable killing monster. But he doesn't necessarily want to be. It's just the choices that he's made that have made that the only option.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things I find interesting is that there's definitely a dichotomy of characterization. Because I mean, one of the things I liken it to is he's the quintessential supervillain. There's the version that you know, and then there's the version that you don't know. So, for example, I kind of liken it to as a flip version of Batman. Okay, everyone's scared of the Dark Menace. Everyone's scared of what they see in the public venue, or what they think they know of him. Because I mean, Vader is essentially a boogeyman when it comes to the Empire. But you look at the person beneath the helmet, or in Batman's case, the cowl, it's a completely different person. The persona that was given off, like Anakin Skywalker, I mean, he was always Vader. The attitude, the mentality, the brutality was always there, lurking beneath the surface. But it was hidden behind the facade of the Jedi training and the Jedi mentality. But it was always there. Going to the dark side just gave him the excuse to let it all out. All that frustration, all that rage, all that anger. Same thing for Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne died the moment when he was a child, when he watched his parents get killed in front of him.
Slow motion pearls.
Right. Yeah. And he doesn't understand who this new persona is until he finally puts on the cape and cowl for the very first time. But he recognizes that Bruce Wayne is the mask. Same thing. Anakin Skywalker was who he used to be, sure. But Anakin Skywalker died when his mom died. The one thing really holding him in check, because he wanted to live up to his mom's expectations. When that was gone, everything else became clothing. It just became a vestige that he wanted to uphold whatever expectation they had, however realistic or not it was, but he just couldn't do it. And so when he has the opportunity to embrace the dark side, he does, and it brings out the worst in him.
Mm-hmm. So I think we just answered our question we're going to ask of who was responsible for the fall of Anakin Skywalker. It's Anakin Skywalker.
Well, I have a different answer.
Is it Mace Windu?
He's a factor. I mean, it's the easy answer, but but even given some analysis, I think Emperor Palpatine is the one that brought him there. In that, absolutely every limiting aspect in Anakin's life, including Shmi Skywalker, is removed from Anakin's life at the behest of or to the benefit of Emperor Palpatine. Palpatine, Darth Sidious's apprentice Darth Maul removed Qui-Gon Jinn from the equation, ensuring that Anakin would be trained by an unprepared Obi-Wan Kenobi. Anakin Skywalker's beloved Padawan was removed from the Jedi Order at the behest of Emperor Palpatine, off the table. Everything that could have kept Anakin good is removed from Anakin's life, largely by, or at least through the machinations of, Darth Sidious.
Yeah.
Up to, as I've discussed previously, the time that Sidious reveals himself to Anakin at the time when the only Jedi to report it to is Mace Windu. Now, granted, I'm not an objective observer of Darth Sidious's actions, but I do think it's without him pulling one lever after another for Anakin's 20 years of life from the time Sidious laid eyes on him. At the end of episode 1, Sidious says, "We shall be watching your career with great interest." He promises, "I'm going to be watching you." And he brings him right along. By the time Anakin chooses to join the dark side, it's less of a choice than a foregone conclusion. He has no more agency in that decision than does Sidious's lightsaber.
See, I have to disagree with this. I think at every point, Anakin had a choice to make. At every point was presented with two choices, and he always had the choice to make he had the ability to make the right choice. I think at every point, he could have made a different choice, but he chose to do something different. I think that's what happened at the end. That was part of his redemption, was the fact that at the end, he took ownership, because throughout his entire life, every time he always made excuses. It was always somebody else's fault. It was the Jedi are letting me live up to my potential. This is happening. Even when he was Darth Vader, Sidious made me like this. All these other things. But at the end, when he finally threw Sidious over, he finally came and took ownership of what he had done. Everything he did, every action he did, was his choice. When he was in the Jedi,
I can see it from that point of view.
He didn't have to kill the younglings, but he chose to. He didn't have to do any of it, but he chose to. Yes, the other people in his life may have been contributing factors to that, coming to that decision. They may have guided and molded and done things to lead him to make those choices easier for him, but ultimately they were his choice.
But by that time, at episode 3, Anakin's choices have removed everyone else from his life. He has no other choice. I believe that's how he would perceive it.
He has few choices, but the choices are still there. I mean, so I had this teacher during my senior year of high school. He taught both civics and econ, so we did like a semester of civics, a semester of econ. And he was an economist by trade. That was what he got his degree in. And one of the things that he talked about was the scarcity of our most precious resource, which is time. Okay. Because of that, because you only have X number of hours in your day or X number of hours in your week, that determines the number of choices that you have available to you. Those choices determine the decision you're going to make. And the thesis of your argument, Brian, is that you're saying that there wasn't much of a choice to make for Anakin. And the thing is there's always at least two choices: do the right thing or do the thing that was the easiest to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to switch. I'm going to switch genres. I'm going to switch franchises here. But Albus Dumbledore is quoted as saying, "We are always faced with the choice to do what is easy and what is right." Anakin Skywalker in the process of becoming Darth Vader, constantly chooses the easy way out. He constantly takes the path of least resistance.
Allow me to revise my thesis then. Those choices Anakin makes, I agree with you. I think you're right. But I do believe that through the manipulations of Darth Sidious, Anakin is not aware of other choices. He doesn't see a choice that's easy or what is right. He sees a choice of here is the only thing left that I can do, because otherwise I've sacrificed the Jedi Order and all my friends for nothing. It's kind of a bit of a sunk cost fallacy, but by the time he's killing younglings, he is, as far as he knows, the only living Jedi. There's nothing left for him but Padme. And he's convinced himself he can convince Padme to rule the galaxy with him, which I've taught my daughter, if anybody ever wants you to rule with them, they're the bad guy. And it crops up remarkably commonly in a lot of even children's literature. I was like, whenever you have a British person who wants order, they're the bad guy, or someone who wants to be the boss, they're the bad guy. But I think it's because of Sidious placing Anakin in a position to feel that he had no option. If I don't kill these younglings, then what has it all been for? Because if his only career in the Force is now reliant upon Darth Sidious, so if he doesn't do Darth Sidious's bidding, Darth Sidious will kill him, objectively speaking.
Oh, and even to a point, Sidious was afraid of him because of how powerful Anakin was. That's why
he got such crappy armor.
Exactly. I mean, everything was meant to keep him from being able to heal, from being able to recover from what he needed to recover from. And like, had he trusted in the Force, he would have been able to slowly but surely heal himself through meditation. He also would have been able to. He also would have been able to use the Bacta tanks to a much greater efficacy if he actually trusted in the Force. The problem that he ran into is that, one, his armor and his cyborg components prevented him from the healing process he needed. It kept him focused on the pain rather than being able to focus on the Force. And so the only connection he had was his frustration, his anger, his rage, his self-deprecation, all of those negative things.
That I would argue that's part of the genius of the Bane lineage of the Sith Order, in that that's not an uncommon thing where the Sith Master is not entirely teaching the Sith apprentice everything they need to know. So the apprentice who slays the Master has done so at the considerable disadvantage of not being taught how. And at the point that Darth Vader throws Palpatine down the well, that's despite 20 years of brainwashing and all of that limiting factor that Sidious installed in him, both emotionally and physically. So I think you're right that there are more choices than he was presented with. He was just not perceiving them until Luke's influence opened him up to that side of the Force, that side of himself, to which he had become inured.
And I think that goes a long way towards talking on a discussion of cult mentality. Because you look at a lot of cults, they are taught from the very beginning, do not question this. Do not look for any other sources of information outside of this.
Right. Don't believe your eyes, believe what I told you.
Right. There's a cognitive dissonance there. And the moment that Luke shows up and breaks that cycle, or at least hints at the idea that the cycle can be broken, that's when things start ramping up between Vader and Sidious and Luke. Although, to be fair, Luke was conscripted as a religious convert to effectively kill his father. So what do I know?
When I was a kid, my very first Star Wars cosplay was Darth Vader, and that would have been in 1978, the year I first saw the film. And I'm not sure if either of you are old enough to remember these, but Star Wars costumes did not used to be the costume. To me, when you dress up like a character, you wear the clothing that character wears, right? It's a simple solution. That's how you dress up as a character. But when I was a boy, my very first Darth Vader costume was a plastic mask that looked like Vader, and then black, white, and yellow smock that had a picture of Darth Vader and said Star Wars on it. And I remember at age 5 being angry that this is not a Darth Vader costume. I mean, I still wore it. But,
oh yeah, of course.
I remember being annoyed that like I had to get black pants. There's a picture I love of me in that costume on my front step in like blue Keds and like little 1970s boys trousers, and I remember being angry that this is not what Darth Vader wears.
Darth Vader.
Yep, been there.
Well,
been there.
Let's talk a little bit about something that Vader didn't lose when Anakin became Vader, and that's his sense of flair in the dramatic. Vader is a drama queen.
Yes, he
and
is.
we see it early on. I mean, in episode, the first instance I can really think of this kind of dramatic flair that he had was in Empire, when the line, "We would be honored if you would join us." I mean, the fact that he knows he's going to torture this guy, but he still goes through the trouble of making an entire dinner for them, having it set out, and inviting them in.
I do like the image of Vader actually making the dinner. It's got to be done correctly.
I've got a couple of memes that use like the figurines.
Yeah.
And like it shows Vader like carving a turkey with his lightsaber.
Later in the year, I'll share my all Palpatine nativity scene I set up.
Oh,
nice!
One of my favorite over dramatic. You mentioned it last week, of course, of the hallway scene in Rogue One where he turns off his life support just for the dramatic effect. One of my favorite scenes is in Rebels, and it's the scene where in the cave where he uses the Force to not only levitate the TIE fighter that he's standing on top of, but at the same time uses the Force to also make his cape billow in a windless cave.
I hadn't thought of that. That's funny.
Both. But if you go back to his original cinematic appearance in A New Hope, think about how that whole hallway scene plays out in A New Hope, where the stormtroopers are using their blaster rifles to cut through the door and then blow it open. I'm assuming that's what they did, because you don't ever see them use any kind of cutting tools. But they do that. There's all this smoke from the blaster fire, scorch marks in the walls. They all come pouring through, which, to be fair, the stormtroopers should have had a disadvantage with that because they're going through a much narrower opening than what they're trying to go into. Yeah. I mean, that should have funneled them into a wall themselves. But they eventually break through. They put the rebels on chase, and the last thing that we see is the smoke is still billowing from that doorway, and Vader comes emerging from the shadows.
Yeah,
and
he
is this living shadow in a white hallway.
Yeah, I had a funny now that you mentioned that scene, I had a funny vision in my head of Vader talking to the stormtroopers, and the stormtroopers being like, "So you want us to use the blasters that make the most smoke, right? We got these that are smokeless, right? We can use those." No. Lots of smoke. We have to have lots of smoke. More smoke, the better.
If I'm remembering the timeline correctly, Vader learned that turn off my life support trick about 14 years before the Battle of Yavin, 5 years after the events of Episode 3, when he is hunting Tarkin on Tarkin's home planet, essentially for practice. And Vader is unable to sneak up on Tarkin's crew because they can see the lights of his chest plate and hear him breathing. And so he turns it off. And that's Anakin Skywalker slowly dying for the sake of being quiet. And I think that's a nice touch. It's always interesting to me, the logistics of how one would fight with a lightsaber. They do a really nice version of it in the Kenobi show, when Kenobi is watching out for Vader in a dark and dusty environment, and he's blinded by his own saber, but it's the only weapon he has. You know, like he can't see past this blinding blue-white light right in front of him. And there's something I used to make jokes about, like if I don't think Luke really wanted to kill Ben Solo, because if you wanted to kill someone, he's asleep. I should use the loudest, brightest weapon possible to sneak up on him and kill him in his sleep. But I think to speak to your Vader's flair for drama, that let me turn off my breathing box so that I can sneak up on someone. And I wish I could remember. I think it was in not A New Hope, but A New Dawn. One of the first canon novels. Vader kills the entire crew of a starship, but before doing so, he turns on the PA system so everyone in the ship can hear it happening. Like
That's
in real time.
Well, I mean, and even going back to the Clone Wars, Anakin always had a flair for the dramatic. I mean, there's the episode of where you had stuff going on Mandalore that kind of brought out some of the stuff between Obi-Wan and Satine Kryze, and Pre Vizsla has this detonator. He's ready to thumb that button down and blow everybody sky high. And Anakin sneaks up on everybody. Like Obi-Wan's got a clear shot of seeing where Anakin's coming from, and even he seems surprised by what Anakin does. Anakin sneaks up on the guy, runs him through with his lightsaber from the back, and catches the detonator trigger before anything can happen. I'm like, dude. One, it shows his brutality. It shows his ability to bend and or break rules to be as effective as possible. And two, the flair for the dramatic. Because then he's like, hey, what's going on? What did I miss? And they're like, Anakin, what are you doing?
We see his sense of humor, and I think maybe this is coincidental, but we see his sense of humor throughout the films, and just little blinks, little whispers of, and the novels as well. I think I mentioned previously in the novel of Episode 3, when he is about to kill the Separatists, they say we were promised we would be rewarded handsomely. He also, perhaps my favorite line in Episode 2 is when he, in the Coruscant chase, he saves Kenobi at the last moment by flying under him. And Kenobi says something like, it took you long enough or whatever. And Anakin, totally nonchalant, oh, you know how it is, Master. I couldn't find one in a color I liked. That's just it's a great laugh line for me. And it really, it almost makes me sad to see what Hayden could do when not saddled with dialogue that you can't do that with. And that's that. And, of course, the old standard of careful not to choke on your aspirations. And and as Garrett mentioned, we'd be honored if you join us. That's a great moment.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He knows what he's doing.
So one of the things I like is when we get to see these moments that kind of, one of the things I like though is when we get to see these moments that hint at Anakin's eventual culmination as Vader. So last week I was listening to an audiobook called Star Wars Padawan's Pride. And it takes place about the time when Anakin's about 12 years old. He's only been Obi-Wan's apprentice for 3 years. And so things are still very raw for them. There's a comparison that Obi-Wan keeps making of what would happen if Qui-Gon had been Anakin's teacher, or had Obi-Wan been more like Qui-Gon. And they go undercover to this group of little moons where they are doing pod racing. They're using Anakin's skills as a pilot and as a pod racer, and eventually it comes to out in the open that this is the kid who won Boonta Eve on Tatooine, because one of the other racers is Ben Quadramos, or the guy with the 4 arms who burns out at the starting line in Episode 1. Quadraneros, that's his name. Ben Quadraneros. And so he has to really be careful about what he's doing. But the entire time, he's playing he's not playing a human character, just in case somebody recognizes him. He's wearing the suit to pretend to be another alien. And it's a full helmet and breathing apparatus so that he looks the part of being this other species. The only thing is, because he can't eat in front of everybody else, the tubes that are supposed to be for atmosphere actually have like a food substance in there. So like whenever he gets hungry, he just like kind of like bites down on the tube and just gives him a little plug of nutrient rich sludge until he's able to go into a room and be by himself and eat. But like he talks of, there's this moment where Anakin's thinking to himself that he can't imagine what it would be like, how claustrophobic it would be if he had to wear something like this all the time. And it gives us this hint, and I'm like, holy cow, this is great foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Favorite Vader line? You guys,
Definitely.
do you have a particular, what sums up the character for you guys?
Ooh. One of my favorite lines, and I think it sums up Vader at the near the end, close to the end, when he thought there was no way out, and you can see he'd almost resigned himself to this fate, and it's in Return of the Jedi when Luke has been captured and he's being brought before Vader, and they're having that dialogue back and forth. And I can't remember the line that Luke says. Luke says something about there is still good in you or something like that. And Vader says, "It is too late for me, my son." I don't know why, but that gives me every time, because you can just tell I know, like at that point, Vader had, it's almost like he's realized, I know what I'm doing is wrong. I know I'm a monster. But it's just too late. It's almost
he's
like
right though.
Yeah, but it was almost like, in a way, the way he said it was trying to warn Luke, almost trying to give Luke that. You almost had the sense to me like there was, like, he wanted to say more, like, it's too late for me, but it's not too late for you. But he couldn't bring himself to say that much.
I agree. And Vader was
like,
correct. It was too late for
every
him.
time.
How could he repent? Who would forgive him? Where would he go?
Yeah.
The fact that Leia was Vader's daughter, even though she never knew it while he was alive, she never laid eyes on him except for that one, couple days on the Death Star. But the fact that she was descended from him is what ruined her political career. That came out, and everyone's like, "Oh, she's Vader's daughter. She's trying to make another empire." And so the taint of his evil spread to his children, such that only 3 people know what happened on the Death Star, and Vader's repentance was just not believed by the galaxy.
Yeah.
Garrett, how about you? Favorite Vader line?
Oh, go ahead.
Actually, one of the things I think that summed up Vader's character for me, at least after his fall to the dark side, is on that second Death Star when he and Luke are fighting, and Luke is hiding in the shadows, trying to keep from being spotted. He's trying to avoid the fight as much as he possibly can. And the fact that Vader, there's a desperation to him. He is trying so hard to succeed at what he's doing because he still thinks that somehow it's the best option. But he is so willing and so desperate to please his master and finally get that pat on the back that he's always wanted, that he is willing to not only kill his son, but try to corrupt his own daughter to the dark side. And the fact that it brings out probably the most protective side of Luke is probably that dynamic right there of abusive father towards protective older brother. Even if he and Leia are only just a couple minutes apart, Luke is the older brother.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought of one, and it's a newer one. I just thought of it. I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier. But the final duel at the end of the Obi-Wan series, when Obi-Wan has sliced open the mask and they're having that conversation, and Anakin and Vader says, he says the line of, I am not your failure, Obi-Wan. You did not kill Anakin Skywalker. I did. That's another one of my favorite lines, because that's where you can see that why Obi-Wan treated Anakin, or Vader, I should say, the way he did when he next sees them on the Death Star. And I think that episode. I mean, you can say what you want to about some of the characterizations in that show, but I think that show did the best job of, once again, that, and with Rebels too, his appearances in Rebels, of making Vader terrifying again. Like, I think we've gotten used to seeing Vader as, you said, the sympathetic villain, the one that like, oh, he is just Anakin. Anakin just felt almost like, oh, Anakin was just misguided. He needed to be turned back to the light side.
But nonetheless, a villain.
But a terrifying villain.
Although his body count is shockingly low in Episode 4.
And I love that scene. The one scene that really shows the villainy of, and the brutality of Vader in that show, in Obi-Wan, is when he is stalking. He's gone to that village, hunting Obi-Wan, and he's using the villagers as bait to bait him out. And he drags that father through the window, and when the son starts to try and save him, he just force pushes him away, and then just snaps his neck without even flinching. He doesn't even turn to the kid. He just walks by and just flicks his wrist, and
that is the magic of Darth Vader, in that we can see that murderous creature and also be aware of the sad man inside him.
Yeah,
the one does not exclude the other. If anything, I think it makes the villainy more poignant. That he's made these choices, and he's very good at what he does. It's not what he wanted, but it's what he chose, and he's going to do it right.
You're talking about great Vader lines. I mean, I'm just thinking of a bunch already.
It's Rebels, hard to narrow it down.
In Rebels, when he's fighting against Ezra, and Ezra says the line, "I'm not afraid of you. Then you will die. Then you will die braver than most."
That was my favorite. That's what I was going to say.
Great line. Oh
yeah. Well, and John Mark took mine. I gotta find another now.
And I love that scene when they first run into Vader, and they fight and they get away, and just the description, like, they have no idea who Vader is at that point. They just know, like, they can sense the dark side. And then they run into him, and they somehow get away. And I think somehow that Ezra is talking to Kanan about, we need to go back. We need to fight him. We need to do this. And Kanan straight up tells him, like, no, we cannot fight that. You have no idea what that is. That is beyond me. Like, that's.
Do you think Kanan, I forget if it's explicitly stated, but do we know that Kanan could feel the power of Vader?
He at one point, when they can feel the cold, like they're talking, and even Ezra mixes something. Do you feel that? And he's like, yeah, the cold. Like, they can feel the dark side presence.
I'm always interested in when villains are described via the Force, because in Star Wars, not unique but uncommon to Star Wars is the Force sensitive people can perceive the villains in this series differently. Like, anybody can look at Hannibal Lecter and say, oh, he's charming, but he's also a cannibal, and he's a murderer, he's scary. But only Force sensitive people can see the true Vader. And in a number of times in the Star Wars novels, Palpatine is described as someone seeing him through the Force, and he's just an absence. He's a black hole. And I think that's interesting. I couldn't remember if it was stated, but anybody can look at Vader killing people and say, wow, we can't fight that. But at the time, only Kanan would have been equipped to see the engine inside of Vader, to see how the Force worked him. Well, since you gave away my "You will die braver than most" line, John Mark, I'm going to go to my second favorite, which is out of the Kenobi series. When Kenobi says, "What have you become?" and Vader says, "I am what you made me, Obi-Wan." Because that is not only Vader's confidence, but it's also Vader hitting Kenobi where he knows he is most sensitive. And that's just straight Sith training right there. He knows Kenobi feels bad for him.
It also highlights that Anakin is still deep down in there because, again, he's not taking accountability.
He's not taking credit. Yeah,
choices leading him on that path.
But again, there he's not wrong. Taken literally, what have you become? I have become a 3/4 conversion cyborg because of what you did to me. Maybe I made you, but even so. So yeah, it works both ways, and I knew you'd pick that up, Garrett. Very nice. I almost said I was hoping, but there's no hope. I knew you would.
Yeah.
Then you will die braver than most. Oh God.
Yeah.
Another rest in peace to James.
And of course, there's the we could just have a whole episode of just us talking about our favorite Vader lines.
Right. That would be funny. A 30-minute supercut of just saying Vader lines.
Vader line, yes.
I'll go grab my Vader helmet and voice filter.
I've got mine too. Hang on. That would be funny.
I don't have one.
That would be hilarious. Can you imagine if we all had that and we were trying to sing Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yes, I can imagine that. Okay, Christmas time. This Christmas, folks, mark my words. I will do my Palpatine rap. I have an extended Palpatine rap, and I will also film and release a reading of the Grinch Who Stole Christmas as Palpatine.
That would be epic. That would be so epic.
Wow. On that note, I think that's a good place as any to wrap up our discussion on Lord Vader. And what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, we are going to be talking about lightsabers.
Woo!
I've just been holding on to this for like the last 5 minutes waiting for this. Yes, we're going to be talking about lightsabers.
Yes. All right, then. Well, then, Brian, why don't you start us out by telling us where people can find you at?
I post on the Sith Library and Archives on Facebook. It's a lovingly curated Facebook page, fan page dedicated to the Sith culture and heritage. So come see us there. I post as Darth Corosis.
And as for me, you guys can find me on
Garrett,
Instagram.
Where can people find you at?
Oh, I was kind of jumping ahead there. You guys can find me on Instagram and X at GKJ_publishing, where I do a show called The Right Way. Well, I do that on YouTube at youtube.com/c/GKJ publishing. The Right Way is a show where we talk about what do we talk about? We talk about author interviews, top 10 book recommendations, and creative writing tips. Just had the season 7 premiere this last Saturday, and we've got a great live stream coming up this coming Saturday.
All right. And as for us right here, of course, if you want to get a hold of us, you can do so at our email at warthestars1@gmail.com. Instagram is at war_of_the_stars1, or you can find us on X at War of the Stars 1. We're also on YouTube at WTS 77. We are, of course, a proud member now of Feast of Fandoms. Go check out Feast of Fandoms, all the shows there. More information coming soon I'm not sure if we have a website yet or not, but that will come soon. Check us out on everywhere, I guess, and Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I see that. What else do we got? Oh yeah, Ko-fi.com. Thank you. Ko-fi.com/War of the Stars if you want to support the show, or go to our Spreadshirt shop, spreadshirt.com/shop/war-of-the-stars-. As always, check us out next week, and we'll be talking about lightsabers. And until then, remember, this is not just my Star Wars. This is not just your Star Wars. This is our Star Wars. Until next time, may the Force be with you.